All right, greetings everyone. This is Dr. G. Today is Tuesday, February 15th. Excuse me. Just touching base with you really quick. I had something that came up for tomorrow night's in the beginning of tomorrow night's class, and so I won't be able to start tomorrow's evening's class until about 7:15 p.m. And I did not want us to lose any time or traction, as well as I wanted you to have some materials to be able to review before we got started. I will leave instructions for you in Canvas to tune in to tomorrow's Zoom link around 7:15 p.m. and then we will continue on with our live course. So right now, what I'd like to do is close out Module 2. We have been talking about this for some time, and I wanted to be able to finish out that material, have you review it while you are waiting for me to join the live session tomorrow, February 16th. So if you've been following along in Module 2, we've been talking about checks in the digital age. If you have been following in the textbook, this book right here, it is actually chapter 18 in the actual textbook. So we have been talking about checks, check clearing, how that works, what that process looks like, etc. So really briefly, we're going to talk about the Federal Reserve System. So I gave you a rundown of how the clearinghouse works and what that does, how that operates, right? We talked about that last week. The clearinghouse essentially serves kind of as like a post office for all of the checks that go through the system. The individual banks negotiate and pay those actual negotiable instrument, i.e. those checks on demand when they are presented to the bank. But if that check is drawn on an outside institution, that check has to be negotiated with that original drawer, the drawee institution. So again, if you have a bank that's written on a check that's written on Bank of America, but it's being negotiated at Wells Fargo Bank, that individual person can take that check to Wells Fargo and deposit it, and Wells Fargo will make those funds available. But essentially, that original negotiated document, that negotiable instrument, that check has to make it back to Bank of America. And so that happens through the clearinghouse system. So we talked about that in detail last week. And we also have already discussed that the Federal Reserve serves as that clearinghouse. So, just out of curiosity, even though you're not here live, I wanted to know how many of you know how many Federal Reserve banks there are in the United States. I'm going to give you a quick few seconds to think about it, and then I'm going to tell you the answer. So, how many Federal Reserve banks, if you will, banks, even though they're subdivided into districts like regions, are there in the United States? Well, if you had to guess, the actual answer is 12. I'm going to give you a quick look at that now. What you'll see right here is there are 12 Federal Reserve banks in the U.S. Where are you? There we go. There are 12 Federal Reserve Bank districts in the United States. And they're subdivided out in what I like to call regions. But this is where the banks are located. This sixth one is actually in Atlanta. But it covers this entire lower region here. And then you'll see our region and Region 5, and then so on. So there are 12 Federal Reserve districts, or regions, if you will, in the United States. All right. So as we move on from that, we're going to discuss. All right, did you get out of the frame? You did. Oh, sorry. Sorry, guys. Technology, right? We live with it and we will live through it. Where are you? There we go. But where are you, my PowerPoint? Where are you? There. Keep seeing it and it keeps disappearing. There. So if we're within frame, you're there and there. There we go. It should be in frame now. So again, my apologies for that technical difficulty. So those are the Federal Reserve districts. They serve as the clearinghouses for negotiable instruments, i.e. specifically checks and bank drafts. There are 12 of them. You will see that later, so remember it. All right, so we're going to talk about check 21. So last week we talked about how checks are actually cleared, what that actually looks like. Again, a check goes to the bank, it's deposited by an individual. That individual bank then processes that through, I call the post office, if you will, through the Federal Reserve, which acts as the clearinghouse, and then submits that actual demand over to the originated drawee, the bank in which the check is drawn, for the actual negotiation and tender. Nowadays, what you guys will find is that we have the ability to be able to deposit checks directly from our phones, from our mobile phones, through your mobile applications. And that came about based on the new act, Check 21. So what Check 21 allows you to do is Check 21 the Check 21 Clearing Act gave individual consumers and businesses, for that matter, the ability to be able to negotiate an actual check, negotiate an actual image based on using an actual copy or an image of that check. You don't actually have to have a live document in order to be able to negotiate that actual individual check. And so what happens is when you decide you want to make a deposit from your mobile device, you essentially will take that check, endorse the back of it like you would any other negotiable instrument. You will take a picture of that actual check and then upload it into your mobile phone. Well, guess what? The original check was not presented for negotiation. It cannot be tendered because it's not in its original form. But what Check 21 does is it allows a substitute format of that check to be negotiated and tendered on your behalf. Essentially, it's going to take that check image, that picture, and allow it to take the place of your live check. So that is the actual substitute check. It's the actual reproduction of the image, the front and the back. So anytime you do a deposit from your mobile device, it will ask you to take a picture of the front of the check, and then it'll also ask you to align the endorsement line in the back and take a picture of the rear of the check. The paid to the order of, with all of the corresponding information, as well as the endorser's information on the back. And we talked about endorsements last week, what kind they are, if they're open, if they're blank, if they're restrictive, etc. So that information is all now included in the Check 21 Act. You have a check, you're depositing it from a portable device, like your app on your phone, and so you cannot, or you are not essentially taking that live check into the actual bank. So what will happen is Check 21, the new act, allows you to take a picture, which substitutes for that original document, and it is now negotiated on your behalf and tendered to that original institution. So I'm going to show you a quick video of what that actual process looks like so you can get an idea.
Check 21 is designed to help you work seamlessly with the Federal Reserve or your clearinghouse. Check 21 is comprised of four main pieces. They are C21 Forward, C21 Receive, C21 Return, and IRD Print. Let's take a quick look at the overall check flow process. Each day, your institution brings in checks from deposits. Meanwhile, credit unions and banks everywhere do the same. Every institution needs to get checks back to the institution that issued them, as well as receive checks posted against their own accounts. While each financial institution could exchange all these checks with other institutions on their own, most use third parties like the Federal Reserve or a clearinghouse to handle the exchange. At the end of each day, each institution sends all check images, which are from various institutions, to the Federal Reserve in an ICL file. The Federal Reserve then sorts through the checks and sends each institution an ICL file containing all checks issued against it. Institutions then post those checks to their accounts through their core data processor. The appropriate accounts are debited, but any bad checks need to be returned to the institution where it was deposited. Each institution then sends an IRL file back to the Federal Reserve to inform the sending institution of bad checks. The Federal Reserve once again sorts and bundles the checks and returns them to the corresponding institutions. At this point, they are given back to the members or corrected and sent back to the Federal Reserve all over again in the next ICL. MVI's Check 21 suite aids in this process.
All right, so essentially that is how Check 21 works. So that's how the system works. Again, an image is presented. That image is now sent to the clearinghouse. The clearinghouse then sends that image over to the issuing bank for negotiation and tender. So that's how Check 21 works. All right, so we're going to talk about electronic funds transfer. So with an electronic funds transfer, it's exactly the way it sounds. It's the ability to be able to transfer funds through an electronic means, either via computer, magnetic strip, telephone, etc. You see a lot of those, we use a lot of them in today's in society today when you're looking at things like ATMs, when you're checking out for groceries at the Wegmans, which is a point of sale system where they either swipe your debit card, etc., or they take your actual check and run the check through the system, and it processes the check and it hands it back, and they hand it back to you. That is an electronic funds transfer. A lot of times when you're paying for various items and you do a check by computer, you enter all of the information along with the check number. That is an electronic funds transfer, so an EFT. We use those a lot nowadays, so I'm pretty sure that you have some experience with working with electronic funds transfers. So we also do what's called a consumer funds transfer, or wire. When you wire or send money from one individual to the next, in the industry we call that an ACF. So ACH. So when an ACH is essentially a debit or from your account, and then it's transferred through the Federal Reserve over to the issuing institution. So instead of from going from bank to bank, we're going essentially from consumer to commercial entity, or from commercial entity to consumer. A lot of people pay their car notes, their utility bills, etc., through ACH debit. Um, all of this is governed by the Electronic Funds Transfer Act of 1978. That's when we started initially doing electronic funds transfers. 1977 was when the first wires went out to be able to transfer monies across an electronic correspondence. 1977 is when that happened, and so the government had to step in and issue regulations as to how to govern how we send and receive electronic monies via wire. And then lastly, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a stored value card and smart cards. So stored value cards are cards that actually have stored value. A lot of people, instead of doing Christmas shopping, they went out and they bought gift cards for individuals. They would go to the store, essentially tell the cashier that they wanted X amount of dollars placed onto a gift card, and then that will store the value for the end user to be able to use. So like, if you can see my camera here, you can see that this is a gift card for Home Goods that someone purchased for me in the amount of $50. You can see here that the value on the card says that we could do anywhere from $25 to $500. But in this particular case, the individual person paid $50. It stored the $50 on the actual card, and then now I can use this stored value until I run out of the amount that's available on there, but I can use it at the corresponding retailer based on what's stored on the account. It's also a version of an electronic funds transfer. Also, we also in today's day and age work with what we call digital smart cards. And so smart cards are digital cards. It essentially moves money in real time. And so most of them have a microchip, and it has the ability to be able to track how money moves and for what purpose. So to be able to give you an example of a smart card, I actually have my DC Metro Smart Trip card right here. If you see in the camera, you'll see my Smart Trip card. And with the Smart Trip card, what you'll notice is that for any of you that ride the actual subway train, When you get on the train in the morning